Happy fucking Monday. Okay, I just wanted to start this week's episode off and kind of catch you guys up a little bit. This is the start of our learning how to deal and cope with toxic relationships month episode. This is what we're doing. This is the toxic relationship / healing month of September because we got to go straight into Libra season, ready to fucking go, living our best life, feeling our best, feeling confident. So, in order to be confident, we have to break ourselves down a little bit. The confidence just doesn't come from anywhere. It is a learning experience that we have to sadly endure some hardship, right? Because we can't feel confident and happy without the opposite and feeling broken and sad. So this is not a depressing episode. It is, in my opinion, actually very enlightening. And I have a guest again this week, Alex Scot. She has been on the show before and we have had a similar conversation. However, this episode will be broken up into 2 parts this week and next week. Today, you're going to hear all about toxic relationships, what it feels like to be in one, how to detach from these relationships, steps to really hold on to your power and your boundaries. And I feel like this is relevant for everyone, whether you've been in a toxic relationship in the past and you're already healed, or you're currently in one, or you're currently going through a breakup and trying to detach from some of these feelings. In something that can be so unhealthy and tragic, the way this episode is discussed, it is truly enlightening. It's giving you the confidence and giving you your power back, which is essential for these unhealthy relationships that we endure in our lives. So I am super, super excited for you guys to listen to this week's episode. And we're going to focus this week on being in those relationships and detaching from them. Next week, we will be focusing on how to heal, step by steps on what to do about healing, how to keep yourself detached, how to understand that, being in this situation, it's not your fault for being hurt and with a partner that is unhealthy, but also how you can take accountability in that. So it's really, really, really such a beautiful episode for everyone. And I think it's super relatable. The rest of the month, after getting through this little break up sad moment, will be how to curate confidence, how to heal, and kind of just dive into rejoicing and feeling good about ourselves. That's what we need going into Libra season. And October, it is my birthday, so shit is going to get wild again. But for now, we're going to focus on breaking down these unhealthy relationships and how we can detach and then how we can heal from them. Updates. I know I have not posted this giveaway yet. I'm literally going to try and do it this week. No, I'm doing it this week. I will post the giveaway on the YouTube this week. So make sure you are subscribed on the YouTube channel. Last week's episode did so good on the YouTube channel. I think the last time I checked, we had like 55 views. If you do watch on YouTube, please drop a comment. It can literally be anything, what you liked, what you didn't like. Obviously, would love for you to keep it positive, but it does help with the engagement on YouTube. So please make sure you're subscribed to YouTube. If you want to be a part of the giveaway, you can watch. You will watch the video on YouTube when I drop it, and I will make sure you guys know exactly when it gets dropped and how all the rules for that is going to work also. But in the meantime, make sure you're subscribed because you will have to be subscribed to the YouTube to be entered in the giveaway. Again, I'm going to pick 3 or 4 people, and then I'm going to have you guys pick your favorite episodes, post them, and tag me online. All of that will get done this week. For real, holding myself accountable, help me help you. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as I did recording it with Alex. Also, she is a coach for unhealthy and toxic abuse, narcissistic abuse. So if you feel inclined to reach out to her or follow her, please do. I will be posting clips and tagging her and everything as well. And she does have a beautiful breakup guide on her site too. So I'm not sure if that's discussed in this week's episode, but you will hear about it if you are interested. Go give her a follow. Okay, enjoy. Girl, stop talking. All the shit that people are thinking but not saying. I'm not even like drunk. I've just been like drinking. Does my podcast offend you? Men, if you're listening, I apologize in advance. Women, hey bitches, are you ready? Are you still talking? Girl, stop talking. Happy fucking Monday, bitches. We are here. I have a guest on today's episode. Her name is Alex Scot. If you are a OG of the show, you know that we've done an interview before. I think you said what, it was like 2 years ago?
It was just crazy.
So crazy. Like literally when I very first started, and I would just wanted to welcome you again. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm so good. How are you?
Good. Well, will you refresh the listeners'
Sure.
mind on who you are, what you do, and like how, you got in this space of, what you're sharing
Oh man.
online.
Okay, yeah. So who I am and what I do. Hey friends, my name is Alex. I kind of like to call myself a mental health hippie that is sharing golden nuggets. I got into the life coaching influencer space honestly by accident, thanks to COVID. The Cliff Notes version is I had done so much of my own healing and personal development that the person I was dating at the time, when COVID hit and I was laid off from my job, they were like, why don't you just share what you've shared with me? Like, I've learned so much from you. And so I headed to Instagram like any millennial does and started sharing what I had learned. And then it like really just popped off and grew into a full-time business for a minute. And now I'm kind of doing it just for fun, part-time. I still see clients here and there. But really, I got into doing what I'm doing today by making my own mistakes and figuring it out the hard way. So if I can help anyone figure it out in a less hard way, I'm about it.
I love that so much. I mean, I love that you like referred it to being just such a millennial thing to do also, because
so
COVID was
true.
like, it was the perfect time to start something like that with all that huge transition and people like more online. So can you tell everyone like, what is your niche? Why are we here today?
Okay, so my niche, I got really popular in the narcissistic toxic relationship healing space. And the reason that happened is because I had a narcissistic partner, and I mean I didn't know that until the very end when things were dire. And then when I started putting those puzzle pieces together, I realized I had a parent who also had very patterns of narcissistic behavior. So it really brought up a lot for me, and everything, like once I connected those dots, it gave me a really clear path on like what I needed to fix in myself to even have healthy relationships. And so that's what I do, is I just share all of the tools, tips, tricks, golden nuggets of information that have helped me go from being someone who attracted narcissistic toxic partners like moth to a flame to now being like way more secure within myself, knowing what to look for, knowing how to have my own back even when life is throwing curveballs. And at the end of the day, that's all any of us can really aim for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. And I love that you like through this journey of figuring out like your relationship and then being able to connect it to a parent. I think that honestly says a lot that you really are looking at the bigger picture and becoming more
100%.
self-aware, because I think a lot of these things that as adults we start to learn is why we're attracted to certain relationships is really because it's like a childhood trauma or like something that we were missing, or a way that a parent or a parent's significant other has like treated us, or even just like your parents' relationships that you've seen. And then that's like what is almost feels comfortable. So then we end up finding those same things in life. And that is like the biggest mind fuck of all.
Yes, it is. It's the biggest reality pill to swallow. I remember one time I had a client and she was coming to me out of an unhealthy relationship. And I remember like slowly just like, okay, so tell me what it was like, with your dynamic with your dad growing up and with your, all these little things. And she finally looked at me one day and she's like, everything can't track back to my childhood. Like, really? And I was like, girl, the
Sit
research
down.
does not lie. Yeah. I was like, you want to talk about the science and the research? Like, literally, we are monkey see, monkey do. And it's not just when it comes to things like walking and playing with toys. It's literally whatever is modeled to us relationally in childhood.
Yeah.
Unless we become aware of that and start to intentionally show up and choose a different response, you will be repeating the same patterns for the rest of your life. Even if it's a miserable experience, we gravitate towards what's familiar.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to another podcast of this doctor, and he has this book called Addicted to Drama. And he was talking about, I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. I forget his name, but he was talking about how like normally these things like because they do feel comfortable to us, like that's what we like seek out for, even if it is a negative experience. And then he talks about how like when you try to get out of it, you no longer feel safe, even though like what you were in made you feel safe. It's literally like the opposite of what most people would expect, but it's like crushing those like unhealthy habits, and like the new foreign habit is like the happiness or the peace, and it's really like trying to step into that, which is just insane.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot because it's so true. And even within myself, I had to do a lot of unlearning of like, oh, I'm so used to these like crazy toxic fights that like not fighting and having a conversation feels really bizarre to me. And it's all about unlearning and reconditioning. It's a very unsexy way to talk about healing, but when we look at like the basics of what we're doing, that's all we're doing.
I mean, healing is not sexy anyways. Like it's glorified to be sexy, but that's really not what's going on.
Girl.
It's like ugly girl crying in your closet at 2 a.m. to your
like
best
crawling
friend.
on the floor. Like, what is my life?
Yeah, it's like FaceTiming, sobbing in your car while you're trying to get coffee, and someone's like, "How are you doing?"
Yes.
I'm fine.
Literally, that happened to me the other day. Like I was walking my dog and someone tried to hit on me and I literally was just like, not today. Like I was like, do not.
My God.
I was like, I can't. And they just started laughing because I had like, it was just like such a relatable of me like shutting it down. Like it's not even me trying, like, I don't think you're weird. I'm just like,
you're like, not today.
Not today.
He's like, respect.
It was really fucking funny. But yeah, healing it's definitely not sexy to go through the healing process, but what is sexy is seeing and feeling and experiencing the results of the healing. That is fucking sexy. That's great.
Yeah, and it's, I think, just it sets the tone for something better, like there's all these sayings where it's like the after the rain, what is the fucking saying, like the rainbow after the rain or whatever. It's like you, without experiencing the sadness, you can't experience the happiness because you wouldn't have anything to like relate it to.
Totally.
Okay, so before we get into like healing and what all that looks like, we gotta flip it around. We gotta turn it around on its head really quick.
Okay, we'll talk about the unfun stuff.
Yes, but I think like, a lot of people can relate to this stuff. I mean, obviously, like you're doing this for a living. We're all learning and growing. And I think to realize that you're in a happy relationship, we have to have those like bad, toxic relationships. And I think toxic can be like a spectrum 100%. Of things, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So I really wanted to kind of start like maybe in the middle. Let's say we're kind of questioning our relationship. We're not super happy like in this partnership with our other person. How would we know whether or not we're in something that is considered toxic or unhealthy, if you will?
How are you feeling? Like my first question would be, how are you feeling in the relationship most regularly? Like, I think if anyone is experiencing anxiety all of the time, I think if anyone is experiencing this form of like walking on eggshells, filtering your experience, silencing yourself, like that's not healthy. When it comes
really quick, I'm so sorry, because I think this is like a good thing to kind of elaborate on. Can
Yeah.
you elaborate, like, what is walking on eggshells? Like, what is the
Yeah.
feeling that, like, the person has
Oh,
in order to,
yeah.
like, coin that phrase?
When you ask me that question and I try and put myself in that experience, even just now, like practicing,
Mhm.
like, ooh, what does that feel like? Literally my esophagus like gets into my, like, I just feel like this heart clenching, like everything, can't swallow, dry mouth. I think for everyone, like the sense of walking on eggshells is like really tiptoeing around someone else's emotions or your own
Yeah.
emotional experience. And I think this response is either you're trained to walk on eggshells. So like when I say that, what I'm thinking of is like my childhood. Like I had a very explosive parent and I never knew what I was going to get when they would wake up. It was like, what version of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde am I going to experience today? And so until I knew if they were in a good mood or not, or if, they were safe to be around, I was walking on eggshells. I was being very quiet. I was minimizing my
Mhm.
experience. I wasn't speaking up for myself. And quite honestly, I wasn't speaking at all. It was like I was waiting for the beast to kind of like give me permission to exist in
Like
that
some
same space.
signs. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, when we hear, and it might be a little bit, so a lot of what I do with clients is, what is this emotion? And that's hard to do, is labeling it. Am I sad? Am I scared? Am I,
Yeah.
frustrated? The other part of what I do a lot of is, how can you tell you're experiencing that emotion? So how can I tell I'm anxious? Well, my heart is beating a mile a minute. My palms are sweaty. I'm clenching my shoulders up to my ears. But it's going to be
Mhm.
somatically, like in the body, different from person to person. So I think like, just when we talk about, am I experiencing something that's healthy or not, very bare minimum, the first check-in is with yourself. How am I feeling? Do I feel safe to speak up for myself with my partner, or am I scared of their reaction to what I'm going to
Yeah.
bring to the table?
Yeah.
Do I feel like I can be me and be accepted for being me? Or do I feel like this person is demanding a different version of me and trying to control my behaviors, how I dress, how I talk, how I show up in the world? And if you're starting to notice, like, I don't feel safe being me, I am scared of their reaction, I do resonate with walking on eggshells, then it's like most likely you're experiencing something that isn't 100% healthy. Now, with that being said, when you say toxic is a spectrum, I completely agree that that's part of it. Like, just because you might be in all, the other thing is relationships go through seasons. So maybe if someone is like
Right.
hella stressed at work, they might be less tolerable with certain things that they're usually more tolerable, of in your relationship. So not only do you need to be mindful of that, you also need to be mindful of yourself. Because, for example, before I did any of my healing work, your girl was anxious all the time, even if I was with someone who is like Joan of Arc. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, because of my conditioned experience and my own limiting beliefs of like, I'm not good enough, they're going to leave me, I had abandonment wounds. Even if my partner wasn't doing anything, I was anxious and walking on eggshells. So it's, when we have
Mm.
these really heavy talks, and like, I think it's good to peel back the layers, but this is why it's so freaking important to do the inner work, because until you can discern the difference between, is this my own conditioning being triggered right now, or is my partner doing something that makes me feel this way? Like,
Yeah.
that awareness, until you have that, you're going to be emotionally reactive to things and in like unable to communicate and have healthy discourse without that awareness. Okay, that was a
Yeah.
lot of talking.
No, that, I mean, I love it, girl. Take it away. Making my job so easy.
Oh
No,
man.
but there's just a lot of information around it. And I think you really nailed like a lot of it right out the get-go, like it's it's so true to you literally had another question and you answered it before I even asked. I was like, that's perfect. I was going to say, like, how do we know whether it's the other person or if it's us? And I like that you said you have to like be self-aware enough and understand, like, did I have these feelings? Did I have these emotions before this relationship? Like, is
Yeah.
part of it because I'm struggling with my own securities, insecurities, different steps of learning like what I'm trying to understand about myself. And I do think like again those things kind of go hand in hand. Like
Mm-hmm.
normally when we're not feeling 100% secure around ourselves, we're not feeling confident, we typically pick people that are like a reflection of
Mm-hmm.
how we feel of ourselves, you know?
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, I think it's a good thing and it's a hard thing to look at too, because I think a lot of it is like self-awareness and accountability. Like at
Mm-hmm.
some point you have to take that step back and be like, what am I doing to like attract this type of person?
Yeah.
And that happened with me, like just speaking from
Mm-hmm.
my own personal experience,
Yeah.
I never really was the girl that like had a boyfriend. Like I'm talking like through high school. I always wanted one. It didn't happen for me. It was always my friends. Like the boys always liked my friends. And so I think like looking back, that led to partly some of this like desperation for wanting to be loved. So then when I came into a couple of my like young adult relationships, they weren't great. They had a lot of these like toxic tendencies or unhealthy behavior patterns, and they continuously got worse to the point where it actually like led me to be in a very scary situation that had like a bigger effect over my life. And it was the moment where I literally thought like this guy could beat me, when I really had to like
Yeah.
take a minute and step back and be like, why is this happening? Like, why
Right.
did I choose this person? And I remember asking myself that. I remember
Yeah.
sitting there and being like, what is it about me that is picking this same person?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it just kept getting worse and worse, it was scary because the
Yeah.
last one, it got to the point where like I feared for like my safety.
Yeah.
And luckily it did not get to that point, but like I said, it was so close to that point where it was literally like I could be left in this room with someone and like and I'm scared of like what could happen if I stayed.
Yeah.
And that was a really hard thing for me to figure out. It took, well, the detachment of a toxic relationship, which we'll talk about in just a second, but it really
Crazy.
took a long time for me to like understand exactly why. And then I came up to that, the realization that I
Mm-hmm.
was desperate. I was literally just desperate to be loved by anyone, even if that meant sacrificing like what I deserve to have and how I
Mm-hmm.
deserve to feel. And admitting that to
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
it's hard,
So
I'm
hard.
like, I'm having to sit here and be like, okay, you're just a thirsty ass bitch, like, and you're
Yeah.
dating these shitty guys, you know?
Yeah,
So,
I think it's hard for anyone who struggles with, and when we talk about this sense of like I was desperate to be loved, right? Which I resonate with so much. It's like someone choose
mhm,
me, someone value me, someone see my worth so much so that they love me fiercely. Because on the other, there's a few things like because we identify as that, we usually tend to love very fiercely, which is a
yeah,
wonderful thing. It's just we need to qualify and vet whoever we decide to give that love to, right? And not and use that with healthy boundaries, which is like the healthy healed version of it. But on the other side and underneath, when we're not healthy and healing, right, it's I'm not good enough. And so it's like we are,
yeah,
without realizing it, we're chasing someone to prove that we are good enough. And the reason I think it's so hard to, for anyone who struggles with that limiting belief of I'm not good enough, which is a lot of people, um, we really, really, really have the tendency to shame ourselves for shitty mistakes or decisions we've made. And I think a lot of people shy away from healing that, struggle with that, because it's like we think if I take responsibility for what within me, like you said, the question, which by the way, same question that I asked myself, what within me is choosing this reality? What within me is
yeah,
accepting this treatment? What within me is okay with tolerating this type of behavior, this type of person? And when we take responsibility, and I'm purposefully slowing down because this is a huge digestible point, but when we take responsibility, there tends to be a secondary emotion of shame that comes online that feels so intense that people start to adopt this belief system of I made a bad choice, so I am a bad person. And
Mm.
that is the furthest thing from the truth. I'm actually getting a little emotional because this has been, ironically, coincidentally, this has come up within my friend group so much this week of like, and I was talking to my
Yeah.
therapist about it earlier this week when we're talking about like why people are choosing not to heal. It's because they don't want to feel shame, because they assume if I
Yeah.
do something bad, even if I don't intend to do something bad, I must be inherently wholly bad. And that is not true. And so for anyone listening to this, that's like, ooh, it's scary to have self accountability. It's scary to look myself in the mirror and be like, what am I doing that contributes to these patterns in my life that I'm not fucking stoked about?
Yeah.
Just know that it doesn't define who you are innately. We are
Well, and it's
all imperfect humans trying to figure it out as we go along, you know?
yeah. Yeah. And it's honestly, it shows it's powerful. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's the exact opposite of like
Mm.
what that fear
Yes,
actually is. You know, it's like
exactly.
you're taking the step to be like,
Mm.
this is how I'm feeling. I do have this fear. Then you are changing that. You're flipping it. You're actually holding yourself accountable and you're
Yeah.
seeing, you know, the other perspective. But I love that you brought this up because I literally just had the same conversation with one of my girlfriends like a couple days ago. And that's
Crazy.
what she was like. She was saying that she was having tons of fear about just her life and where she's going and the relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
she's going through an active breakup, and she was like, but I'm not gonna let it in. I'm not gonna, because, you know, I shouldn't let it in. I'm
Mm.
whatever. She just like tried to shut it down. And I told her, I was like, girl, I think like that's a huge first step. Like you're taking accountability. I think that's
Yeah.
powerful. Like
Yeah.
you have to look at that as like, I'm taking my power back because you're
Exactly.
recognizing, you
Yeah.
know, you're recognizing like what you didn't want to necessarily see beforehand. I
Mm-hmm.
think like giving those negative things power is when you're pretending like they don't happen,
For real. I
you
completely
know?
agree. And this is when we get into the sexy side of healing. Like, it is, how sexy is it in a work environment, in a friendship, in a romantic relationship? How fucking sexy is it when someone can say, ooh, I'm going to be self accountable and name what I did that probably wasn't super great. Like, hey, I raised my voice. I
Yeah.
got in a mood. I snapped at you. Ooh, hey, I told this fib because we didn't want to hurt your feelings. And like, then I got caught and that's shitty. And I'm really sorry. Like, the second someone can take self accountability, own it, and apologize for it and change their behavior, that's sexy. And
Oh
that
my
doesn't
God.
just
Yeah.
apply to other people, that applies to us. Like, it's
Hmm.
sexy for me to sit down and say, ooh, I have the power to change my life. This is the pattern that I've been participating in that no longer serves me. And now I'm going to do this instead. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that is like, God, I think that's probably the sexiest thing out there. Like, when I really think
Yeah.
about it, like, immediate
Yeah.
panty dropper,
Yeah.
you
Oh my
know?
God, could you imagine like the guy that you're with and he's like, you know what? Like we just had an argument and he comes back and he's like, that was wrong. I'm sorry that I raised my
Yeah.
voice. Like I would prefer to just talk to you and really work this out because I love you. It'd be like,
Yeah.
well, I think for those of us who are healing, we'd be like, what are you trying to do? You're like, you're not going to yell at me. I feel uncomfortable, you know?
Perhaps, yeah, and you can even voice that, and even if you're like, "Ooh, there's a
Yeah.
part of me that's like, wait, what? Is this real life?"
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I
you
still
know?
struggle with that even in my current relationship. And this is like to throw it back to what we were talking
Mm,
about earlier, how like we realize our relationships are stem from like our
yeah.
parental figures or our childhood. I am starting to realize that I always thought it was hard for me to communicate issues because of my toxic relationships. But as I've grown, it's actually been, I've had this like aha moment. It's like, it's crazy because I'm not in therapy right now, but I've done a
Hmm.
lot of it. But I still have these moments where, like, in my real life, I'm like, if I was talking to a therapist, they would be like, we made huge progress today, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. You don't
So,
need to be in therapy to get that gold star. You can do so much processing on your own. Yeah.
yeah, but I think like therapy is great because they give you the tools for it.
Sure.
And then so
Yeah.
that's like once you have the tools, then you start learning some of those things in other situations.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say was, um, I realized that this issue of like it being difficult for me to communicate was from childhood. It was
Yeah.
from like having a very reactive parent that also didn't give me the space to voice my emotion, voice how I'm feeling. It was very like one way road. This is what I say. This is right. You're wrong. And we're done talking about it type of thing. And to
Yeah.
me, like now as an adult, like I have learned that that's not how relationships work.
No.
Like, and I think the beautiful thing is relationships aren't even about being right and wrong. That's like not
No.
for me, it's a
No.
no. Like it's about truly understanding like the other person's perspective and knowing that like we may not always agree, but we're going to give each other the space to try and understand like why we're reacting that way. Where is
Yeah.
it coming from? You know, and I think that's like obviously this we just like went on a tangent,
We
but
did.
this is like the part of the healthy relationship. Like these are signs that you look for in a healthy
Yes.
relationship because that's how there should be space to talk and not be judged and not have things used against you at a
Yeah.
later time.
Yeah.
You
Mutual
know?
respect. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay,
Totally.
so let's shift gears back into I want to talk about once we've realized that like okay, we're not happy in this relationship. We've seen these signs of, you know, unhealthy behavior or toxicity if you will. I feel like I'm always anxious, walking on eggshells, all these things like so let's say we've made the decision that we no longer want to be in this relationship anymore. I think I
Yeah.
would really like to talk about what are the steps to like detach in a healthy way because I truly believe that this is the hardest thing to do. And I know I always tell my friends, I'm like, it's going to be hard to leave, but what's going to be harder is to stay away. So,
Totally.
how can we slowly start to like, first off, like leave the relationship? And then what are some things that we're going to feel through this detachment phase? And also, like, how do we move forward in a way where we don't keep like repeating the cycle?
Oh, what a loaded question. Okay, so
I know
part
that's a long
one.
one.
Yeah, so part one is how do we detach and leave this relationship? Well, this is going to be one of those things where it's like a multiple choice answer depending on the severity of the toxicity within the relationship because
Sure.
the reality is that if it has any form of abuse or even what you were alluding to in your own experience where like you were fearing for your physical safety, like this, it could have turned into domestic violence. Like
Yeah.
the
Well,
most
it
I
did,
need,
but
yes,
yes.
I'm so sorry. It's
It's okay.
not
I'm
funny.
like
Like we
laughing.
can
It's the
laugh. I
trauma.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the trauma. All right, let's take a breath.
Yeah.
But if that is the case, you need to have a safe exit strategy. The most dangerous times in relationships that are that severe on the spectrum is a breakup or if someone got pregnant.
Yeah. Oh
So
God.
yeah.
Oh, I
So
cannot even imagine.
if there is that kind of a threat, you need to have a support system. And for some people, like I remember when I was leaving my narcissistic ex, where similar threat, he was never physical with me, but he had been physical to the point to where he went to court ordered therapy. She had to get facial reconstruction. It was like gnarly, like real bad.
Ooh.
That when I found that out about him and I was trying to leave him, you have to plot your escape. So it's like, I was playing the last 3 months of our relationship. I was playing Little Miss Perfect Girlfriend,
Yeah.
which was complete bullshit. Meanwhile, I'm getting my stuff out of his apartment. I'm telling my friends what I'm planning so that they have my back. Like you really have to, again, it's like a chess match. Like you have to think ahead. Now, if it's not that severe and it's toxic in the sense that like this isn't serving you and you don't want this and you really want to go after something healthy, you have a little bit more flexibility because like you have some options with breaking up with them. You can call them. Honestly, this is going to get a big reaction out of people. I don't care.
No matter what. Well, I think, yeah.
But
Like
what
even, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you're good.
No, you go.
I was going to say, so, because I agree with you, they will have a large reaction. They are going
Yeah.
to scream. They are going to, they're going to try and manipulate you to stay. They're going to say lots of they're going to do two things. They're either going to go first down the path of, but I love you. And if you really loved me, you wouldn't give up on us. And if you continue to stick to your guns, then they will absolutely get verbally aggressive and say, well, fine,
Yeah.
I didn't give a fuck about you. And like, and
Yeah.
they're going to lose their mind, right? Or some people just go straight down that path, like from the get-go.
Right.
But what I was going to say a moment ago, which might get a large reaction from people listening to this, is I don't give a fuck if you text them. Like if it's that bad, like I think ideally in majority of relationships, if it's healthy, if there is a form of mutual respect, you have the conversation face to face. But when we're talking about toxic situations that may or may not have abuse within them, I do not care if you email them or text them your breakup note, right? So anyway, that's going to happen. Now, here's the deal. When we leave a relationship, everyone needs to understand that you go through a withdrawal period. Like your body and your neural pathways, like literally the little highways in your brain, get so used to connecting with this person, hearing from this person, that when you initially break up and now you're not hearing from them, you're not contacting them, you're not going on dates, you're not having sex anymore, like your body is going to lose its shit. You are going to feel like a drug addict who is repairing their bodies. And so this is where I say throw yourself into healthy coping mechanisms. So we're eating whole foods. Okay. So we're getting our greens in. We're trying to move our bodies. We are processing those feelings, cry, scream, just like what you and I said. We are FaceTiming our friends with a box of tissues. We're rolling on the floor. We're watching sappy movies, whatever it is you need to do. But like, let yourself feel and support your body by some gentle movement and trying to get a whole. And I'm preaching to the choir here, guys, because I'm someone who stress starves. I literally will not eat for weeks.
Yeah. Well, and I think this, like what you're saying right now, like I just want to highlight, like is so important because again, this is the hardest part.
It
like
really is.
when your body is withdrawing from this relationship, like you said, you related it to like a drug addict. It's literally what's going on. And so, it's like you're trying to break this cycle, and it's almost like you're having this inner battle within yourself to be like, because you have found comfort in this person, and then you think like, well, now I have no one, like, and I just want to stress it so much. Like, you don't sound like a broken record. I mean, I know you're speaking for yourself as far as the food thing, but it is like, people who have been through it, people who are maybe going through it, like it feels so counterintuitive to like what we think a breakup is actually going to be like. Like they're almost even more like hyper intense than like a normal breakup,
Oh my gosh, they are. They totally are, because the intermittent reinforcement that happens in toxic relationships is that. So just to take a moment and kind of pause, like I'm really into science. And if you guys have followed me or probably listened to any of my other podcast episodes, whether with Tatum or on other shows, you will hear me talk about science so much because I love it. And it is scientifically proven that falling in love and being in love with someone is as addicting as cocaine. They looked at the brain in MRIs of someone who had a cocaine addiction and then someone who was just in love, and they showed them a photo of the person they were in love with, and the same centers of the brain light up because of that dopamine reward of like whatever we get out of that experience, right? So it really is like you are fucked up. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like when you leave like a healthy relationship, this is so funny. I had a client ask me that. They were like, is it easier to get over a healthy relationship and breakup or a toxic relationship breakup? And I was like, it's so much easier to move on from a healthy relationship breakup because it's like you're aware of what happened, like you have that level of discernment where you're like, this is my part, this was their part, whatever, right? And then, but with a toxic breakup, you're like, you really are coming off of, like I said, the intermittent reinforcement of like, I hate you, I love you, I hate you, I love you, all of the starvation and then the affection, like. And so when you leave and your body is really used to these high highs and low lows, and now you're just stagnant, you're not getting anything. You're not getting the bad, but you're not getting the good. Your body is like, where's my next hit? Which is why so many people rebound.
Go back.
Yeah.
So many times.
To the same person or get under somebody else.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, even like whether you obviously if you rebound with the same person, which by the way, if you're on here listening, I feel you. I went back over and over and over again until I finally had enough. So like, no shame. So either you end up doing that or, you know, you rebound with someone else and then you wonder why you're still stuck in the same patterns with a different face. You're like, oh my God.
Or you
Option 3.
rebound with someone else and then you end up getting back with your ex that you
So
just
true.
left and
Yeah. I've
and
done that
then
too.
girl, and then they blame you for a whole other set of problems. But I think like the biggest thing with these like toxic relationships is that when you're dealing with a person that has these traits or has this type of behavior, it's always going to be something.
Oh
It's
my
like
God, yeah.
you know, first it's the clothes you're wearing, then it's hanging out with your girlfriend, so then you stop doing those things. Well, then it's your family, and you know, it's like it's always going to be something.
Yeah.
But yeah, God, could you imagine? You try to leave, you hook up with someone else, then you go back and then you end up telling them or they find out or they accuse you enough that you're honest. And then it's this whole other spiral of problems.
And you're always the one to blame too.
Exactly. Of course. No, and that's, there's no accountability on the other side.
No.
It's just continuously pumbling like
And
your
I
worth.
think when we go back to like, how do I tell if I'm in an unhealthy relationship? That's huge. Like if you somehow are always the one that is like apologizing and the other person is never taking responsibility for their half and apologizing at all, then like run for the freaking hills. Cause like it's not possible. Like relationships again are two imperfect people coming together. Both of you are going to fuck up. You know what I mean? And both of you better be taking responsibility at the same time, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So when we go back to like ways of detaching and trying to really set ourselves up for success, the other part is we got to detox and this is the hardest one, I think, social media. We got to fucking put it down. We got to put it down. And it's hard because it's like you like whether you unfriend, like unfollow, mute their story, block them, which again, depending on the spectrum, it's a choose your own adventure, you know what I mean? But you have these different options. You need to let that part go. And I think that's really hard because again, we're so used to seeing them and we're so used to interacting them and we're so used to knowing what's going on in their day-to-day life to all of a sudden cut that off. And the other thing that is weird is like social media, again, is part of the millennial generation. We have grown very accustomed and lenient on it. Whereas like generations ahead of us, they didn't fucking have that. So it was a lot easier to be like, well, I'm not calling her landline and I'm not showing up, you know, on her doorstep. I'm not thinking, you know what I mean?
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And so it's created, what I'm trying to say is like, we as a generation have way more capability of being codependent in this way because we're used to being online and accessible at our thumb tips, you know, constantly. So give yourself a lot of grace here because that's definitely going to be the hardest one, is to not put on your FBI hat and be the best fucking stalker in the world. You gotta let it down. Yeah.
Well, you're never going to find something that's going to make you feel better too, you know? And I'm like a firm believer in, if you're trying to leave a toxic relationship, you have to cut all ties. You have to delete the photos off of your Facebook or your Instagram. You got to block them. You got to block their number. And like, you really have to stick true to like understanding that like you chose this, like what were the reasons that you chose this. And I think that's another thing too, personally, that I did when I left that really crazy relationship of mine. I wrote literally, which sounds so basic, but I wrote down pen to paper pros and cons. What were the pros of this relationship? How did it make me feel, you know, and the cons. And when I tell you the cons list was so much longer than I think I had 3 pros. Because I literally think I had 3 things that were pros on this list, and being able to go back to that and just refocus in those moments of where I'm feeling like, oh, I want to reach back out, or I want to unblock him to see like
Mm-hmm.
what he's posting or whatever, I kind of took a step back and I had to remind myself, like, I made this decision. Why did I make this decision? And then I went
Yeah.
to that list and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is why, because
Yeah.
I feel like shit. He treats me like shit. He's like, I've had to call the police 6 times. You know what I mean? Like, there's reports, there's this, there's that. And then I just, started remembering all those things, and that kind of kept me grounded a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
along
Yeah.
along with a lot of late night phone calls, like, like crying and
Yes.
repeating the same stories over and over. But
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to like
Yeah.
live in that moment for a little bit and be like, you're like reconditioning yourself and trying to understand like why all these events happened and why you've been have been
Yeah.
treated that way,
Yeah. So what you're describing here is a brain phenomena known as the fading affect bias. And
Oh.
so everyone goes through this, and if it's a healthy relationship, it's not as big, it's not as much of a threat to be reminiscing in a way. When it's a toxic, so let me just back up. What is the fading affect bias? The fading affect bias is a phenomena when our brain likes to basically suffer temporary amnesia and it forgets all of the bad and romanticizes the good, right? And when it comes to a healthy relationship, that's not so bad because it's like there's going to be a lot more good than there was bad when you're reminiscing on a
Right.
healthy relationship. So it's kind of like bittersweet, tender heart. Like there's not as much like visceral intensity to it. Whereas
Right.
when we're dealing with the fading affect bias with a toxic relationship, it's very dangerous because the majority of the time with the toxic, potentially abusive relationship is way more bad than there is good. And so your brain starts to forget all of the bad and hyperfixate on those tiny little dopamine hits that you would get. And that's when we become very susceptible to reaching out with all of the little like petty, whether that's as simple as an Instagram like or an actual text or call or email. And it happens on both sides, And so what you just described, when you're like, I wrote a pros and cons list, I give that client or my clients that exercise all the time in my breakup SOS course, same thing. I'm like, before you even start, I need you right now to either write a letter to yourself, reminding yourself of why you're sticking to this breakup, or better yet, voice note or videotape yourself. Because the second you hear yourself
I just
getting
got
emotional,
goosebumps. Yes.
I've used this tool so many times because it's
Wow.
like the second I hear me like Alex getting emotional over whatever it is, like in the case of my toxic ex, this was so powerful to me. It was like I could have my back more because it's like, no, like that poor girl is suffering. I'm not going to do that to her again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a really powerful tool, but just that, the science of what you're describing, that's what's going
No.
on.
I love that. I love that you were able to hit us with some facts, because I didn't know that, and I laughed when you were defining it, because I was like, wow, like story of my life. I wish I would have known that sooner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So true.
But yeah, I mean, it is crazy. So I'm glad that you described that, because it is nice to feel like these things aren't just being pulled out of anywhere.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, this is, like you were saying, this is the science behind it, and like having some evidence is also great. I had a random thought and then it just escaped me. Oh, the video thing that you said, like creating a video or a voice note, like what a good way to hold yourself accountable. That's amazing. Like,
oh my gosh,
I would have never even thought that. That's like a level up from the pros and cons. Like, I think that's so great to really visualize, or like have that audio to really be like, this is, you did this was the choice, this is why we're here, remember those times when that happened. It's like, oh my God, like if you could look in a mirror, you know what I mean? It's almost like your future self talking to your current self, even though you recorded it in the past, like
it really is.
That's beautiful.
It's very helpful. And I can't tell you how many times it sobered me up real quick when I was having a moment of weakness, but same for my clients. Like that's an exercise that I still have people reach out to this day. And they're like, it was the only thing that helped me get through that period where I'm struggling to be like, oh shit, do I really want to stick to this? Yeah.
Wild. Okay, you mentioned that you have like a breakup SOS course. Like, let's hear a little bit about that. What is all that about?
So that course is specifically designed to help people who are leaving toxic, abusive relationships, narcissistic relationships, stick to their guns, stick to no contact for 30 days. And the reason there's so much, like, really no contact is forever, you know?
Yeah.
But those first 30 days are always the worst because that's when our neural pathways are being rewired. That's when our nervous system is going through withdrawals and tripping balls, like just straight up.
Yeah.
That's when it's the hardest. And so I designed Breakup SOS to be, you get a daily email from me with video trainings and an exercise to do. And
I love that.
for 30 days. So I'm just basically blowing you up to support you. And it's been insanely powerful for the women who have gone through it. It's very Taylor Swift themed because I at that time I have ADHD and I was hyper fixated on listening to Reputation. So it's very like tongue-in-cheek Reputation, like fuck the world vibes in there. But it's just, I think the thing that I have noticed more and more is when we are going, this is tender. When we are going through these periods, there is such a temptation to hide and self-isolate because it all feels like too fucking much, right? It's like, I don't want to be social. I don't want to have to like call, even for me, sometimes like calling a girlfriend felt too vulnerable because it was like, for me, especially in the case of my narcissistic ex, I had already talked every one of my girlfriend's ears off about the fucking repetitive shit that I was putting up with. So by the time I was towards the end of the relationship, I was fully hiding the fact that I was even seeing this person for the 1,000,000th time because of the shame and embarrassment I would feel from my friends being like, really? Like, really, Alex, you're going to go back to this loser who has already cheated on you 50 times and rubbed it in your face? Like, didn't even try and hide it, like blatantly. And so by then, when I was trying to heal, I was hiding, I was isolating. And so that's why when I created Breakup SOS, it was like, even if it's just me virtually being like, hey, I'm here and I get it. Like, I know past me would have, I'm not going to say killed for a program like that, but would have done some crazy things to find the money to pay for it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I literally needed it. So, you know, when I created that program, that was with past me in mind, because fuck, it's hard, you know?
Yeah, no, I think I can definitely agree with what you're saying. I think it's so true. I think those of us that have been through this experience, I get it. You know, it's like you almost feel like this burden to your friends because you're like, I know they're sick of it. I know they've heard this 1,000 times. Now I'm like lying and being mischievous and still going out here. How am I going to go back and say that like now it's done for real again? Like, I totally get that. I love that you kind of just like explain that program a little bit. And we're not done yet, but we will make sure to put all of that in the bio so that you guys can reach out to her and find that, because it does seem like a really, really great tool.
It is.
So moving on to, I want to touch base on like healing through this a little bit. You obviously help people and coach them to like help get through to the other side. So I think like, let's talk about like, how do we start to heal once we've limited that 30-day contact? It's been 30 days. We're like, I haven't talked to them. I'm like, think I'm starting to like feel normal. Like, what are some of the things that we can continue to do to like create more healthy habits?
Are you still talking? Girl, stop talking.